you looking to sharpen your budgeting skills? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast, where we talk about life, family, and how to afford it. And now, the Budget Couple themselves, Nate and Danielle.
Welcome to the Budget Couple Podcast. I'm Nate.
I'm Danielle.
And we are the Budget Couple. Welcome to episode 1 of the Budget Couple Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about us, introduce you to us, and so we can kind of have that conversation of where we've come from. We're going to explore exactly where we've come from in our budgeting story, where we're at now, and kind of how we got started on a budget. So we'll kind of give you the entire landscape of what we've done as a couple and our budgeting story.
So to start us off, I'll introduce myself. Again, my name's Danielle, and we live just outside of DC, and I'm a social scientist. So I have a kind of a very analytical type of brain, and I think that's where a lot of my relationship with money comes from. I could be considered pretty cheap, I think.
Just a bit.
But at the same time, I think I have areas where I am willing to spend a little more money. But overall, I would say I really love to save, and it comes really naturally for me.
And I'm a teacher. I obviously live outside of Washington, D.C. with my wife. But I'm a teacher, and I've always been a saver. But I haven't been the same kind of saver Danielle has been. She's kind of the person who hides money underneath her mattress, whereas I'm more of a person who likes to have money in the bank, but also isn't afraid to spend it, especially on gadgets. I love gadgets. This whole reason this podcast exists is because I bought some gadgets. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of where Danielle's at in our relationships. We're both kind of natural savers, I would say, but Danielle's more of a hoarder. I'm more of a save and spend it on bigger items type of person. Is that fair to say, Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a comfort factor, I think. I like feeling like I have control over my money.
And I do as well. I like to control it to buy things with sometimes, whereas you like controlling it to let it watch it grow and get bigger and more beastly there.
Unless it's Sims, video games, or traveling.
Or for the baby.
Yeah, that too.
We did neglect to mention, we are parents. We have a toddler. He's just about 2. So we have a toddler here. He's milling around. He's actually taking a nap right now, which is why we're able to record this. But he's there. We spend a good amount of money on him, especially with daycare. And we have to go through all of that. And we also have 2 dogs, we have a house, and we have 2 cars, one of which is fully paid for, the other one, which we got probably about 6 months ago, and has a fair way to go.
But we'll talk about all of that later.
Absolutely. So let's get started with talking about us a little bit, where we came from, how we met, and kind of our process on where we're going with budgeting.
So we're pretty far into our marriage, I guess. We're about 7 years. Is that right? 7 or 8?
Yeah, it's 7.
Okay. So when we first got married, I was actually in grad school in Texas, and I drug Nate out there with me. I was in my second year then, and both of us had very low-paying jobs. I was just a lowly teaching assistant, and so I was only making about, I think, $17,000 a year, and Nate can tell you a little bit about his job.
I worked at a call center for a cell phone company doing technical support. It was a fun job, but at the end of the day, it really wound up paying about $22,000, if that, a year. I think my base salary is about $12 an hour, and there's some incentives for selling things that I could go with. But that was it. So we lived on around 30-something thousand a year.
Which wasn't bad for Texas. I will say that our rent was, I think, around $400 or $500 a month.
Yeah, so we paid $535 a month for a fully furnished 1-bedroom apartment. We had a $100 security deposit that went along with that apartment. And then we had to pay another $100 security deposit once we got our dog that we got the first weekend when we were down there. So while we didn't make a lot of money in that area of the country, we didn't need to in order to be successful. And jumping back even before we got married, Danielle lived in Texas for herself by a year. She made that same $17,000 or so, and she was able to save about $5,000 in that time. Just to give you an idea of how cheap she is, she was able to save $5,000 on a $17,000 income. So we're not talking like first level budgeting here. She's like really good at it.
But I will say I kept most of it in my head. I actually didn't have a written budget at that time.
And that's kind of where our budget came up. Is because when we got married, we went on our honeymoon and we were able to fully pay for it. We've never really been in debt for long periods of time other than our house, which we'll talk about in a future episode. But we went through and started noticing that our credit card bills were bigger. I think our very first credit card bill was $600, and that was mostly from our honeymoon. So we were living in Texas. We had to get a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't either get when we were married or driving halfway across the country. We didn't have room to fit, like a TV stand, those type of things. That $600 came as a little bit of a surprise to us because Danielle was really good at keeping track of stuff in her head. I usually was as well, but
it's harder when you're a couple. Actually, you kind of feed off each other, and I think it's easier to maybe go a little overboard because you talk each other into things.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm definitely the enabler in any relationship as far as spending goes, where if we're at a store and she sees something she really wants, I'm like, just get it for yourself. You don't do anything for yourself.
Whereas before we got married, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, she would have just lived that kind of minimalistic life where she didn't have anything fun. But I kind of hopefully helped with that part of it. But we got our first credit card bill, and it was more than what we planned on because we didn't really have a plan for money. We didn't know what we were doing with it. We just kind of thought we could go along and do what we did. We made enough money to live. We knew we made enough to pay our bills, and that we thought was enough. And it turns out it wasn't.
Yeah, so, I mean, we decided it was time to change a little bit. And I think I was actually, weirdly enough, I was actually the one that drug my feet a little bit in when it came to creating a budget because I'd never done that. It had always been in my head. I was always able to know exactly what I was going to spend it on and what I was going to make. But as a couple, you really do need to do something together because you can't be in each other's heads as much as you maybe don't want to be or want to be sometimes. But, for us, we decided to go ahead and make a budget as a couple. And we started out pretty simple. We just put an Excel spreadsheet up and started putting in what we made and also what our main expenses were. And kind of went from there. Actually, Nate kind of took a lead role, I would say, in creating it, at least at first.
One of the few times I take the lead with money. But yeah, we went through because we noticed we weren't really saving any money. We had decent savings. Like out of college, I had about $10,000 to my name from working various jobs from high school on and not really spending that money. Danielle probably had about $5,000 or so to her name. So we had about 15 grand in the bank, which was nice because that was basically a year of Danielle's income. The problem was that not all that money was actually in the bank. We had expenses that were due with it, and we didn't want to touch parts of it because we knew if something happened, we needed that money to fall back on. Our healthcare coverage wasn't that great. I think I had a $5,000 deductible, so we needed to keep that in the bank at all times because if God forbid something happened, we needed to be able to pay for it. So we came up with the budget because we weren't saving, we weren't planning, and we kind of had this vague idea that if you do things with your money, if you invest it in certain ways, that you can become much richer, much better off down the road. And that's kind of where we started. So as far as starting up the budget, we looked at different items as far as what are our fixed costs and what are things that we don't necessarily have to spend money on.
Yeah, we had to kind of divvy up fun money. We had to figure out how we were going to put that on there. Originally, we had just had an overall entertainment budget for both of us, so that would be going out with our friends on weekends or going out to eat, maybe going to the movies. That would include really anything extra that we were doing that wasn't in our set bills. It worked okay, but there were a lot of times when it was causing a little bit of friction for us, especially times when Nate would go out and buy a bunch of beer for himself and put it on the together entertainment budget.
It was for us. I just wound up drinking most of it.
So we would kind of argue on how to spend that. And Nate actually kept suggesting that we split that up and have individual kind of entertainment or fun budgets. And I was actually, again, the one that was dragging my feet a little bit. Honestly, I don't really remember why at this point.
Because she's stubborn and I can't have good ideas.
I had a reason for why I thought we should keep it together. But we did, in the end up splitting it and giving each of ourselves a certain amount of money, which I think back then was only about $50 a month, maybe $100.
I think it was 50 because we didn't actually make that switch until after Texas. We moved to Delaware because Danielle went to school in Delaware and I got a teaching job in Pennsylvania. And we decided to move to Delaware because if she ever lost funding, we'd rather pay in-state tuition instead of out-of-state. But that switch didn't happen until about 2 years into Delaware. It took us a while
I don't remember
to go through that. Yeah, it took us a long time to go through that. And I think part of that was also because we were making more money, so we felt like we had a little bit more freedom with the budget, and we probably didn't do as good of a job saving. Well, I think we actually did a decent job saving, but we didn't do as good of a job of allocating our funds monthly for ourselves as what we could have during that time.
But I will say that since then it really did work a lot better. We didn't really argue over that entertainment budget anymore, and we knew that those budgets that we separated for ourselves, we could do whatever we wanted with. So if Nate wanted to go spend it on really dumb gadgets and beer, he could do that. And I will say I spent a lot of mine on beer too. But
making me sound like an alcoholic over here.
No, I love beer too. But it caused a lot less friction because we both just were able to spend it on whatever we wanted without kind of consulting the other person, while we still had our other together entertainment budget. And that would be times when we went out to the movies or went out to eat and we were together. So we kept that one as is. But basically over time, like Nate said, we increased our budget, we increased our income obviously a bit. So we just adjusted our budget accordingly. We didn't really change the underlying foundation of it, though, or the underlying setup of it at all.
Yeah, and I think part of what our kind of mindset, not only on budget, but in life, is that we want to be fair with everything. Fairness is kind of important to both of us, and that I was spending more of the budget or she was spending more of the budget some months didn't jive well with either of us. So we made that adjustment where we each got a separate part of the budget. And starting, I think, at $50, it went up to $100. Now I think it's at $150, which still isn't that much money. We could spare more, but we're not going to because we have other goals, which we'll talk about in future episodes. But getting back to kind of the original setup of the budget and the mindset. The mindset for us was that we wanted to tell our money what to do, not for it to control us. And I think that's one of the keys with budgeting is being able to understand that a budget isn't there to tell you can't spend money. A budget's there to tell you what you can spend money on. That's a very key distinction that a lot of people don't get, because when you say I'm on a budget and I can't do this, a lot of people say, well, that means you can't have fun. And
I'll add there too that to me, I see it as, and when I've talked to other people, I know they're hearing it like this. It's much like dieting. So if you tell someone you're on a diet, of course they're going to think, oh, you're restricting what you can eat and when you can eat, and you're trying to lose weight. But actually, the phrase diet is not necessarily meaning, losing weight or restricting. It can just be how you're eating. So you're changing your diet from maybe a meat-based diet to a vegetable-based diet. It's not necessarily about losing weight, but it's just changing what you eat. So I think of that kind of the same way with a budget. So, you're budgeting your money not necessarily to save more or to get out of debt or to, for any particular reason, but you're just budgeting it because you need to have a healthier relationship with it.
I think that's well said, to have a healthy relationship with money where it's not controlling you. You want to be in charge of it, because at the end of the day, it's really just a number. And being able to tell that number what you want to do with it is important. It allows you to do a lot of stuff. In the 7 years plus that we've been married, we've visited over a dozen different countries. We've gone on week or 2 week long trips.
Thanks to Danielle.
Yes, she's the travel planner and also really good with the budgeting on that. We'll have an episode where it's probably just going to be her talking the whole time on that at some point. But we're really good at going through and making sure that what we want to spend stuff on, we spend it on. And what we value is what we spend our money on. We also want to make sure that we're investing in ourselves for the future. And we'll have a whole episode on retirement planning and how we went about doing that and where we're currently at with that. So we're looking at a whole bunch of different things on this show and seeing how they go through. And we really want to make sure that you come along that journey with us, because while we're the budget couple, we're not perfect at it. We're growing, we're changing, we're doing everything there is. On future episodes, we'll be going over our retirement, how we plan for our son's college because he already has a college fund set up, how we're able to take care of cars, our house. We also have solar panels. We'll go through a whole bunch of different stuff and different budgeting scenarios. And this show isn't just a talk of Danielle and I talking to you. It's a conversation that we want to have with you. So if you have any input or anything like that, please use the contact form on our website, budgetcouple.com, and we'll be happy to interact with you and answer your questions and kind of have a go-between so we can have a good, engaging conversation about a healthy relationship with money.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Budget Couple Podcast with your hosts, Nate and Danielle. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit budgetcouple.com. Make sure to check out the next episode of the Budget Couple Podcast, where we'll talk more about life, family, and how to afford it. We'll catch you next time.